I have had many times where the humans in my life felt not as supportive as my spirit group. Happy to say that's no longer the case, but there were quite a few decades where that was true. And I spent a good deal of time connecting and reflecting and meditating because that's where I felt WHOLE, whole. Hi, thank you for joining me for this episode of Intuition, Your Success Compass, where we discuss topics of life, how to best use your abilities, your gifts, really appreciate who you are, how you're wired, why you're here, and have some fun while we're doing it. And to apply these because it really is our soul's greatest joy to feel empowered and playful about this human experience. And it's my intention to get as many people to hear that we really are doing these human journeys to have a good time, to embrace, to learn, to grow, to discover what we're not so great at, to figure out what we are great at, and to really appreciate the whole process and not just the shiny bits and everything. So this week, we are going to talk about soul contracts. And we're talking about soul contracts because wonderful listener Lisa sent me a message on Instagram and asked a specific question about soul contracts. And is it possible for one person in the dynamic to learn about and to complete the soul contract without the other person or group, if it's a larger entity, having to get it? And so we're going to cover that. I'm going to talk about what is a soul contract. Can they be changed? Can they be severed? Can they be, I like to think of them as released. Do they involve past lives? What happens when a soul contract is fulfilled? And whatever comes up in the middle of that. So, total transparency, I recorded this whole episode and my microphone was on mute. There's this little button on the Yeti mics that if you hit it, it puts the thing on mute. And I checked it. I had a message from my guides to make sure the microphone's okay. And when I checked it, it was listed in the program, okay. So I was like, no, we're good. I never thought to check to see if I hit the mute button. So I took a week break and I'm back to talk about this again and to have it be delivered to you in this way. So I appreciate you being here. It's humor of the universe. I trust that these things happen because I'm a klutz, but also because there's a reason. And I feel like this week, I am much more playful than I was last week. I don't know about the rest of you. I'm recording this the first week in November. So actually very shortly before it goes out next week. And the energy's been pretty intense. And I've been kind of a sad sack and pretty serious. And even knowing that it was my stuff as well as what's going on universally and what's going on in each country, that is contributed to that. And then that, oh my gosh, amazing full moon that sometimes can throw me for a loop-de-loop. And then I thought, what a perfect time to talk about soul contracts. Because again, we do not come into this human experience just for the shiny bits. We want the contrast. We want to know about what's going to help us grow, what's going to lead to expansion, at least from the soul level. Sometimes I feel like our human selves go, come on, I need a little break. And that's okay too. So a soul contract is very much what it sounds like. As a soul, we choose who raises us. We choose who brings us into this world. And those are contracts. And then we set up contracts along the way. Like think of your kindergarten teacher, if you remember that far back. Think of a coworker, or maybe I've had some, when I was in corporate and everything, I had some really dynamic women who were amazing examples for me sometimes of how not to be, but most of the time, how to be in the world and how to be smart and respectful. And those are soul contracts. So think of someone that you've been any kind of interaction with. We have very minute ones, very short ones, like the guy who was here yesterday cleaning my chimney. We have a baby contract, and I'll have him back again because he loved my dog. He did a good job too, but he loved my dog. And if you love my dog, get in a little bit faster here. So that's a soul contract. So they're not all going to be at the level of which you have with your parents, siblings, if you have them, partners. They're not all going to be that deep. And I think that's good because I think we do need to lighten up as humans. So the soul contract is one that you may have with an animal. It may be one that you have with a location. And not everything as a soul for your journey is set up. Actually, very little is. And most of it is done through choice and action and what you learn along the way. But these soul contracts are there think of them as possibilities. So wherever you are in your expansion will determine what partner you end up with, or partners, if you're poly, or partners if you have more than one in a lifetime, which most of us do, or if the partnership is solely with yourself because you've decided that an intimate partner relationship is not it's just not an interest for you. You can still have amazing soul contracts with your bestie or with the community. So a soul contract, though, keeps us connected a bit more. And you may recognize a soul contract because have you ever done that thing where you're like, where do I know you from? You look so familiar. Mike thinks this is funny because everywhere we go, we were just in Cape Cod this past week, and the woman renting the Airbnb, who normally you don't meet the person renting it, but we were fortunate enough to. And she's like, where do I know you from? And Mike's like, everybody knows her. And then I explained to him, well, these are my soul contracts. Like, whomever we connect with are soul contracts. I don't have to get into a deep discussion with her, although we had some great talks, because our contract is one of passing. I said, but they also recognize energy. So some of your soul contracts, when you meet someone and you're like, where do I know you from? Could be because you have a similar frequency. So you're traveling in a level and vibrating at a level of familiarity. So think about that the next time somebody says that. Now, you may have paths that have crossed and you find out fundamentally your kids went to middle school together and you just didn't remember meeting them. That's entirely possible. But the majority of the soul contracts will feel slightly familiar at times. And I am not talking about soulmates. I'm going to put this in here. It could be its own episode. I am not talking about soulmates. You do not want a soulmate. Let me say that. You do not want a soulmate. You may want a heart connection. You may want a connection. You may want a spirit vibrating, physically harmonious relationship. But if you go looking for a soulmate, you're going to go looking for problems, because a soulmate in our creation was originally to help us learn through contrast. So all of these countries and all of these people and groups that are at war with each other and who are just intent on connecting with the other, even if it's to control or to act out some of the heinous acts that they're doing, those are soulmates, because on some level, there's an agreement to learn. Now, we never sign up for abuse. No soul comes into this experience saying, I would like to be in a domestic abuse relationship. I would like to be raised by like my father who cleaned my clock quite often. I know I chose him because he had a very astute entrepreneurial sense. And he had a good sense of humor, which I had to really search for. And he loved retail and he loved the people that he met in the community. just forgot to bring that home. I know he loved me on some level. So any sibling who's going to jump in here, just save your breath. I got it. I know this. But that's a soulmate relationship that I choose not to continue. And I'll go into more of that later. Not the story, but how I release the contract. So if someone is suggesting to you, especially as we get around to that, holiday that's in February where it's commercialized, and they're suggesting that you want to meet up with a soulmate or you have a soulmate coming, I would clarify that. Because if it were me and someone said that, I'd beat feet the other way and say, let me see if I can learn this without putting my head backwards through a meat grinder. Thank you very much for the opportunity. So your soul contracts, they will evolve over time. So the more work you do, the more self-awareness and the more raising of your vibration that you participate, the less contentious your soul contracts will likely be, because you're understanding more and more of the human dynamic, but also of the process of eternal life. And when you know that, you just don't get hung up on stuff as much. So your soul contracts can become more less combative, less contrary. So this episode seems to be brought to you by the letter C. So can soul contracts be changed or broken or released? Yes. But like Lisa was asking, can one party be the one to release them? Yes. You do not have to wait until the other person or group, community, country gets it. You don't. How many times have you stayed in a friendship, in a relationship, in a job, in an argument with a sibling or anything, thinking that you had to stay there until they got it? Well, that's an egotistical approach. That is asking the other person to agree with you, and that's not always necessary. Now, here's the tricky part. To release a soul contract, you must arrive in neutrality. Yeah, think that. You actually must feel in your heart no disappointment, no level of, well, if only they would, no wanting to be right or wanting to prove another, well, I guess be right and prove another wrong, kind of the same. But you have to be able to wish the other well and to genuinely mean it. And it takes a little bit, especially if these are relationships that there's been further progression of past life transgressions, or, maybe they just lied to you, or maybe they agreed to do something and do it. They don't have to be major infractions to want to be done with someone. I actually, when I hear of someone going no contact and get a little bit of information and find out if it's truly because the other person had egregious behavior or actions, or was it a power play? Like when I find out that someone's gone no contact, I'm like, congratulations, because that can be one of the first steps of releasing a soul contract. Now, you can also release a soul contract and still have the person in your life. And once you do that, I have found that it can be more enjoyable to be around people. So an example, my father, like I said in the past, he cleaned my clock quite a bit. And we had discussions about it, but they were more like, you're not hitting me again, back up, or I'm going to flatten you. Thankfully, I've never had to follow through on threatening to hit somebody because I don't know if I can do it. Well, if I had to protect you, I could do it. But my right hook is awful if kickboxing has any proof to it. So in one particular moment, if you are familiar with people who are experiencing dementia, sometimes they have moments of clarity in which they return to their body. They're completely focused. You can tell they're in there. They're not in another dimension. And you can have these very straightforward, frank conversations with them if you're willing and you're brave enough. And we had such an opportunity. I remember on the front porch of the house that my brother lives in, that I grew up in. Lives in, he owns it. He doesn't just live there, he owns it. It makes it sound like he's squatting when he's been taking care of it and paying for it for decades. But sorry, Dwayne. But we were sitting on the front porch, beautiful front porch. Always loved my front porch. And a couple of their siblings were sitting around, and Dad had a moment of clarity. And he said, I would never hit my girls. And I said, excuse me, sir, you did. And you did it often. And I could speak from my perspective. It could be quite brutal at times. So yes, you did. And I wasn't doing it to try to put him down or to be mean. I know how important it is to take responsibility for any actions that you have done consciously. And these were conscious behaviors that he participated in. And I felt it was part of my soul contract in that moment to say, no, you need to admit you did this because it's going to bring some peace to your soul. Because I've often felt that one of the reasons his dementia was there, not only because he was on statins for so long, and I feel like it did mess with his brain, but he was also hiding from the reality of some actions that he participated in when it came to us kids and stuff. And I felt like he was hiding from them. And I felt like if I could help in this moment, I've agreed to help all these other people. Why wouldn't I help my own father? And one of my siblings said to me, no, you didn't. Said to him, no, you didn't, Daddy. No, you didn't. And I said, stop it. This is good for him to be able to know he did because he's obviously trying to process it. Right. And this is an extreme case. You wouldn't always have these straight up conversations. But he looked at me and he said, I did. And I said, yeah, you did. Good for you for admitting it. Because at the time, I had no more rage to give around that situation. It just didn't matter anymore to me that was the case. So in that moment, I said to him, and I want to be clear, in our next lifetime together, you can drive the bus, you can be the neighbor, or the hovercraft, whatever we're doing at the time, but I will not be doing another lifetime with you as a partner, as a sibling, as a parent. Is that clear? And he hit the most beautiful blue eyes and he looked right at me and he said, I hear you. And I know his soul felt that. That was actually one of the moments that was most affirming to me in my process, that our soul really is that connected and that wise and that much of a partner, because I had no intention of having this conversation. I didn't even have a conscious awareness that I wanted to have this conversation with him. But when that moment hit, I was taking full advantage of it. And then it was a couple years before he passed. But as he passed, I was actually able to grieve the father I never had. Because I watched him with some of my siblings and they had him, but I didn't have him. And I didn't necessarily want him. I wanted the experience of knowing what a father's support looks like. So, and then I found out at his funeral that I'm the only one he named out of 8. He got to choose, that mom let him have that. So I was really grateful, and I would have loved to know that before he passed, so I could have said, thank you, I love my name. I appreciate that you named me after an aunt you didn't know was her name. Spirit talk. So in releasing the contract with him, I still had to do all of my own emotional work and work with a therapist and do EMDR to get those reactive energies out of there. And I still had to be present to that. It's not going to remove anything that came up as a result of those relationships. So to be clear, I released the soul contract to him and I still had to work through some stuff. I remember one day Mike came home from work and he was just taking his belt off. He wears button-down shirt and dress pants and he was just taking his belt off. I froze and he saw it on my face and he's like, I'm so sorry. And I'm like, I don't have to apologize. It just gave me a clue that there's another level of the contract I have with those experiences that I had to clean up. And the belt no longer bothered me. There does a lilac switch. or a raised fist anymore. So I'm happy to say that works. But can you hear that it might be two different things? That there may be a soul contract there will be a soul contract with the person, but there can also be a soul contract with the experience. So, and by separating those out, you can often heal and learn to trust again, because it's not all related to the processing through, let's face it, mostly our parents or those in a place of, authority over us. So one way to release the soul contracts is to get that therapy, do the work, do your meditation, ask the questions, be brave enough to want to be released from the ties, because yes, are related to past lives, which means it could be related to future lives. So I already know I'm going to come around again. I'm happy about that, excited about that, but I'm stacking the deck, man. I want to come into a lifetime that is still of service, but that is fun and that is exploratory and that is full of learning and as much playfulness as I possibly can manage. So think about the relationships that you've had in your life, and then think about your own free will and your choice, because I can read some of the emails that are going to come my way to say, I had no choice in choosing this parent or whatever. I am going to stand firm and say, yes, your human self right now probably doesn't want to know that, but you did, because you're not the exception to our experience. And if this doesn't resonate with you, well, fast forward through. Like, you have free will and you have choice in how you engage with all of the soul contracts in your. You know what it's done for me? It's helped me lighten up. Like, it's helped me to also look at my part when a relationship isn't jiving or when I'm not getting a concept. I'll be like, all right, there's got to be a soul level learning here that I am just not seeing. And then when it comes to people, I'll be like, okay, what's my understanding with this person? What's my contract? And it's helped me on a few occasions to have better boundaries, because I'm like, this has been going on a long time. I do not think that this is going to shift. I choose to then take responsibility for my part of this and my soul's interaction. I choose to exercise my free will to extricate myself from this relationship. And then I'll work on the soul. Because if it's not really that big of a deal, maybe I see them in the next lifetime. Like, if they're just annoying in this lifetime, maybe I want to track them. So while some may say they're predestined, I don't believe them to be predestined, because to me, that means somebody else made the choice, but no one else made the choice. We all did for ourselves. That's empowering. Like, start thinking in that way. You have that power to then shift how you're living your everyday life. We have, like I said, we have contracts with so many people that I don't want you to get too in depth about this, but to be aware of it can also help you to create a supportive community. Because when you start considering soul contracts, you then start to recognize that you actually don't want to waste your time on those relationships that might be minimal soul contract, not as heart-centered or not as longevity producing to you. Maybe you want relationships that are actually really light for this stage of your life. That'd be fantastic. Then you look for the soul contracts that are in that way, that they're light and they don't ask much of you, because you do need a little bit of a break. If you want to release a contract with someone else, forgiveness. I know for some of you that have had some training in that around that word and it's loaded, I apologize, but it is the frequency. But the forgiveness in my world, in my context, means to let go, to release. So the forgiveness is actually for self. The forgiveness is that you might want to keep it around. that we can get pretty dependent on our trauma story because it validates why we're here. And our subconscious likes to solve for X. And it can be, yeah, well, it can be a good victim story. Been there. Like I know of what I speak. It's easy to tell the story of, well, this is what my childhood looked like. Well, at some point you have to realize you're not in your childhood and you are now the adult responsible for the childhood that you were still carrying around. So forgiveness of yourself. You didn't know not to get involved with that person. You didn't know what the contract was on or how they were going to act. Because again, contracts, although the expansion and the reason may be to learn boundaries, that doesn't mean that it has to be through abuse and trauma. You didn't know that. Like when you got involved with that dumb, that you were going to save because you were the only one that could fix them, you weren't who you are today. So forgiveness of decisions made before you were aware, and then allowing for a feeling of wholeness within yourself. So instead of the HOLEs, you've got WHOLE. You're whole. You feel whole. So self-reflection, meditation, connecting with your spirit guides, connecting with spirits. I have had many times in my life where the humans in my life felt not as supportive as my spirit group. Happy to say that's no longer the case, but there were quite a few decades where that was true. And I spent a good deal of time connecting and reflecting and meditating because that's where I felt WHOLE, whole. It can help you to heal the HOLEs. Didn't know this was going to be a spelling lesson. They will evolve. They will change. They will expand, grow. My contract with my daughter in this lifetime, we were best buddies in previous lifetimes where we got into a little bit of trouble, which makes me laugh because we do have fun when we travel or have adventures together. So I think that's fun to know that, okay, in this lifetime, we decided we wanted to navigate this in a different way. And we actually, when she was 15, 16, renegotiated our soul contract because she had come into this lifetime with the feeling that we were going to be buddies, but she chose me as her mother. So I had to play her mother. I had to be that role because that's what I agreed to do. So at 15, 16, she was about 15, 16, somewhere in there, maybe a little younger. She might have been a little bit younger, but I remember coming home from a deep meditation, past life regression kind of thing I was doing. And I came home and I said, I figured out why we have this contentious thing going right now. You still see me as buddy, so you resent when I put the boundaries down. Because up until that age, I really didn't have to with her. She was very self-regulating. There needed to be some boundaries that had to happen. And her soul was still reading as we were buddies. Like I couldn't tell her what to do. So she's like, that makes so much sense. And I asked her, I said, well, what's important to you right now? That I'm your mom or that I'm your buddy? And she's like, well, I really need my mom. And I said, okay, let's rewrite this thing. So we didn't do anything formal. We just agreed in that moment. I mean, these are the kind of conversations that happen in my couples, but we just agreed in that moment that this is how we were going to travel. And to this day, she will say, like, if she's looking for something from her buddy, because she's 31 now, we can be buddies, she will ask for Vicki Baird. If she's looking for her mom, I can intuit when she needs her mom. She'll usually call me mama. And then I'm like, okay, here we go. So we figured out how to have a coexistent, updated soul contract. And I just think that's so cool. And this is some of what can come from having an awareness of this. It's not all about just releasing the ones that don't serve you, or maybe you don't have any connection with, so you just want to kind of clean it up. But there might be something there that you still have to learn from. So remember when you're going through this process that yes, forgiveness and forgiveness of believing other people's words or their actions could be helpful too. And then, maybe it is forgiving the other person for not knowing what they didn't know, but give yourself the energetic clearing too by either using selenite wand to go around yourself to cut the etheric cords. I ask Archangel Michael, I say, please remove all cords, return them to whom they belong, return mine to me. Thank you very much. Appreciate it. You can sage, you can use Palo Santo, you can go out, stand in the middle of the yard, preferably without shoes on, ground, and then just ask that all of your energy return to you. Because as we go through with soul contracts and as we expand, I think bringing in awareness to them being as mutually reciprocal, kind, respectful, educational, joyful, all the other words, when we raise the vibration, if we bring that intention, there's going to be a ripple effect. And yes, there's always going to be those that are knuckle draggers, that are wanting to control or be the ones that say how the contract goes. But I'm not speaking of domestic situations right now because, again, get too detailed when you're talking on a podcast. But if you're in a relationship and you can't figure out how to heal it or how to raise the vibration in it, you may want to consider sitting quietly and asking, what's the contract here? And then deciding to do something about it because you have a power within you to do that. Your conscious mind may just not know that. So I hope this answered your question, Lisa. Thank you for sending it in. I really appreciate it. I want to continue the process of talking about soul expansion and growth because I know when we connect with the soul, which is our north, and we merge with our south, which is our physical self, and we use the understanding of the west or the wire and take it to the action in the east, our success compass, that thing spins amazingly and will direct you straight to your own personal success, whatever that means for you, because it means something different for all of us. And that's freaking amazing. And so are you. So thank you for being here. I appreciate you coming to the YouTube channel, listening to this on whatever podcast platform. Or if you're on the website, I have a few people that go straight to the website and listen to it there. I just so appreciate you being part of my soul group and for helping me to expand and to bring these topics and to learn how to really live my joy, because then that becomes the example of what success means to me. It means I'm using my compass, right? Thank you very much. Vicki Baird coaching across the platforms. I look forward to hearing from you, and I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you for listening to this episode of Intuition, Your Success Compass. I appreciate you being here. If you would like more information about developing your intuitive skills, removing those blocks, and creating the life that feels the most successful to you, then head on over to vickibaird.com. That's VICKIBAIRD.com. And check out the courses, the groups, and the Spaces app that will allow you to be part of our community and know about upcoming events and specials. Thank you so much, and I'll see you in the next episode.